and discovery and pioneering that will rocket us forward in an incredible mechanism. Because it's really, as humans, we thrive on the frontier. We discover on the frontier. It doesn't matter on the frontier whether you're a man or woman or what religion or what color. If you do the best work, that's what matters. True ability on the frontier matters. And then we end up in social structures where if you're a different class or you're not born in the right family or so forth, well, you can't possibly move forward. So on this frontier, as we move forward, there's going to be tremendous growth. Why do we pioneer? Why do we explore? Well, there are many reasons. Fear is one of the most strongest reasons. You know, in 1957, when the Soviets launched Sputnik, we're at the 50th anniversary now, and then they launched the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin, on April 12th of 1961. And the response to that motion was incredible. In 1961, when JFK said we're going to the moon before the end of this decade, he had no right whatsoever to make that proclamation. We had no idea how to get there. None whatsoever. We didn't even know how the human body would react. There were journal papers written about would the brain work in the magnetic fields of the Earth. Could people eat and drink in zero-G? Well, of course, anybody who had been in a fraternity, you could drink beer standing on your head. So eating and drinking in zero-G should not have been an issue. But we knew so little. And in fact, what's interesting was that when JFK put out this clarion call, we're going to the moon before the end of the decade, the people that responded, they left their jobs, they left their homes, they left work, and they went to these obscure locations like Huntsville, Alabama, Clear Lake, Texas, and Titusville, Florida. And they made it up. The average age of the engineers who built the Apollo program, the propulsion, the navigation, the guidance, was 26 years old. 26. There was no one there to tell them what could not be done. And now, 50 years later, we have everybody there in their 50s and 40s and 50s and 60s telling, well, you know, we used to do it this way. You can't try that. Well, of course, we know that one of your greatest periods of time where crazy ideas become brilliant ideas is in your 20s. So next time a 20-year-old comes and tells you something crazy, I would listen very carefully. That same 20-something-year-old population that gave us this incredible Apollo mission were the same folks that built the dot-com revolution. Again, when there was nothing to stop them from creating, they created themselves. So we have incredible periods of growth, and fear is one of those drivers. Fear of potentially an asteroid coming and barreling down. We know that these rocks, from the primordial formation of our solar system, are out there. We know that every some tens of millions of years they come and they wipe out what lives on this planet. Curiosity is another driver. You know, is there life out there? It's one of the weakest drivers, in fact, unfortunately. It should be one of the strongest. You can actually measure the value of curiosity and fear as drivers in our system. It's the defense budget against the science budget. I wish it was funny. It's unfortunately not. And wealth is one of the other drivers that drive us forward. And it's one that, I think of wealth as energy to do great things. I was mentioning at my table here that one of my missions in life is to go become an asteroid miner. Why? Because the average half-kilometer nickel-iron asteroid is worth in excess of $20 trillion. We actually mine asteroids on Earth. That's where we get our platinum and nickel from, asteroid impact sites. So these things drive us forward. And I'm going to speak to you tonight about two of my companies as examples of the things that I'm passionate and I care about. So, in 1993, a friend of mine who wanted me to finish my pilot's license gave me a book called The Spirit of St. Louis. It won the Pulitzer Prize in the mid-50s. Lindbergh wrote it some 30 years after his trip across the Atlantic. And I had no idea that Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic to win a prize. I thought he woke up one day and just decided to make, go east, young man. And of course, that was not the case. It was a Frenchman, Raymond Orteig, who was born in Paris, moved to New York, was an entrepreneur, started as a busboy in a hotel, worked his way up, and eventually owned 2 hotels, and in post-World War I, loved aviation. And he offered out a prize for the first person to connect his homeland and his new found city, New York and Paris. Well, incredibly, 9 different teams spent $400,000 to win his $25,000 prize. And he didn't pay any of the losers. In fact, the most likely guy to win was this guy, Admiral Byrd, the first guy who went to the North Pole in an airplane. And Admiral Byrd spent $100,000 and crashed on takeoff. Poor guy. And here's this upstart, Charles Lindbergh, barely 26, 27 years old, unknown. In fact, the major aircraft companies would not sell him an airplane because they were so worried he would crash and give them a bad name. Well, he heard about this airmail company called Ryan, and he wrote a one-page contract. Imagine the days when you used to be able to write a one-page contract. And he built an airplane in 60 days, flew from San Diego to St. Louis to New York, and then made it to Paris in 33 and a half hours. But the day before he took off from New York, the New York Times editorial said, "Stop! Don't do this, and you're going to kill yourself and set back aviation a decade." And of course, just the opposite happened. He went, and within 18 months of his travel, U.S. passenger traffic went from 6,000 to 180,000 passengers, a 30-fold increase. And that number, I was making notes in this book, and I'm writing down $400,000 spent on a $25,000 prize. That impressed me. And then 30-fold increase. And it hit me that it was a paradigm change. It wasn't that aviation got easier, the air got thicker, gravity got less. It was the fact that people said, oh! And it hit me then that much of what holds us back is our belief that we can't do something. It's our belief that this is the way things are, and this is the way things always will be. And as soon as we have that belief, we are stuck in the way we think. It's the 4-minute mile. You've heard it so many times in so many ways. So with that, I, since the age of 9, have wanted to be an astronaut so badly. I got a 6-pack of degrees from across the river here to go and become an astronaut. My parents said I told my mom at the age of 9 I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an astronaut. I said, "That's fine, son, but I know you're going to be a doctor instead." And so I ended up getting a medical degree, but it was just 10 years ago my mom stopped asking me when I was going to practice. I wish I was kidding. But I wanted so badly to be an astronaut. And this idea that we needed, I wanted a new private generation of spaceships. You know, Jeffs has flown 5 times to space, one of the lucky few, and realized that my chances of being an astronaut were far, far less than my chance of being an NBA All-Star at 5'5". You know, seriously, there are 100 astronauts in the astronaut program, only 500 that have ever flown. It's the most exclusive club on the planet. And I said, if there are a private generation of spaceships, maybe I'll be able to go. Not when NASA tells me, but when I want to go. So using that motto, I came up with this idea called the X Prize. It was a $10 million prize. I wanted it to be enough money to inspire entrepreneurs, but low enough that the Lockheeds and Boeings wouldn't even bat an eyelash. I wanted new, innovative ideas. I didn't want the same old stuff. It had to be privately funded. Yet you could not, you had to demonstrate 90% or more private financing, so every penny counted. And believe me, some of these teams spent tenths of pennies on the dollar compared to the larger contractors. 3-person spaceship, at the end of the day, meant that the ships coming out of this could go into commercial practice with a pilot and 2 paying passengers, or an autopilot and 3 very brave passengers.